related to the USD Discovery District. Again, this is a research park in Northwest Sioux Falls being developed through partnerships among the University of South Dakota, the South Dakota Board of Regents, the state of South Dakota, the city of Sioux Falls, and Sioux Falls business leaders through Forward Sioux Falls. And ultimately, this will be up to a 252-acre mixed-use, innovation-focused community where entrepreneurs and industry and university students and faculty can really cooperate to create new jobs, to develop the South Dakota workforce, and to bring new innovations to market and really grow the economy of Sioux Falls and the state of South Dakota. So let's go to the next slide. Then just a quick history of the Discovery District, or a reminder for most of you. Governor George S. Mickelson, along with Sioux Falls business leaders and the University of South Dakota, first proposed developing a university-related research park more than 20 years ago. The Forward Sioux Falls Technology Committee subsequently paved the way for a feasibility study that recommended establishing a research park in Sioux Falls. And ultimately, Governor Dugard then signed legislation authorizing the establishment of research parks on lands controlled by the South Dakota Board of Regents. So collectively then, this all formed the basis for the establishment of our corporation, now doing business as the Discovery District. And can we go to the next slide? So I often get this question, what exactly is a research park? A research park is an economic driver. It's a place where, again, entrepreneurs and industry and often university students and faculty can cooperate to grow a region's economy. So these are often associated with universities. And as you know, in our case, we're associated with the University of South Dakota. So at one end of the spectrum, a research park is really a nexus. It's an incubator where new inventions and new technologies being developed at universities come together with key industry collaborators, often to launch new companies and bring those innovations to market. And of course, those companies then generate tax revenue. They provide workforce development. They create new jobs to support our economy. And then at the other end of the spectrum, research parks can serve as a nexus among larger, more established companies in a way that it brings all of the necessary services to support those companies together in one location. And then, of course, those smaller companies that are incubating, so to speak, in the park are then feeding their new technologies into the product pipelines for the larger companies. So once you have a research park dialed in, they are truly machines. They are engines of economic development. So let's go to the next slide, please. So with regard to my vision, as the new president and CEO of the Discovery District, I'll tell you, I am on a mission. I'm on a mission to help develop our region's bioscience workforce. I'm on a mission to bring more of the bioscience and pharmaceutical industries to Sioux Falls and South Dakota. And in doing so, to generate hundreds or realistically, probably thousands of new high-paying jobs in this region. And I'm on a mission to make Sioux Falls our country's next major bioscience and pharmaceutical hub. In my opinion, by accomplishing this, we're going to help stop the mass exodus of the pharmaceutical industry from the United States. We're going to help bring down in a big, big way the exorbitant costs of prescription drugs and therapeutics. And we'll put Sioux Falls and the state of South Dakota on a national stage as an integral part of our nation's capacity for biodefense and the development of life-saving therapeutics. So let's go to the next slide, please. Now, accomplishing this will obviously will be a process. And the first step in that process is establishing what I would call a critical mass of the bioscience industry here. To do that, we'll start with some of our local bioscience industry, and then we'll tap further into my pharmaceutical industry network to really extend our reach to the U.S. seaboards and beyond. So since my arrival at the Discovery District, We have charged forward with a new bioscience complex that includes several local bioscience organizations, really to begin establishing that critical mass. Now, we're still in the due diligence phase of that development, but based on the timelines of the developer that we've engaged, it's possible that we could have this bioscience complex completed and occupied by the first or second quarter of 22. In parallel, we've also begun mapping out our second bioscience complex, which will be occupied by out-of-state industry, that we bring to this region. Doing business in our country's existing bioscience hubs, places like San Diego, San Francisco, Boston, and Baltimore, even places like Boulder and Austin anymore, it has become cost prohibitive. The barrier of entry then for clinical stage companies in this industry has become cost prohibitive. So for the second bioscience complex, we're tapping clinical stage companies that are really in need of an affordable facility and in a community with a reasonable cost of doing business and a reasonable cost of living. And now we have several of these out-of-state companies lined up for that second bioscience complex. So then looking to, and let's go to the next slide, please. So looking to 2022, with one bioscience complex completed and another one well on its way, that then gives us the critical mass that I indicated, that we need to take our next step in establishing Sioux Falls as a pharmaceutical hub. And that next step is bringing in a major contract development and manufacturing organization. And I'm certain we can accomplish that, once we establish that critical mass. Now, the beauty of this for South Dakota, as most of you know, manufacturing is the major bottleneck for the pharmaceutical industry. So where these manufacturing operations go, the rest of industry tends to follow, or a good chunk of the industry follows. This then is the key to establishing Sioux Falls as a major pharmaceutical hub. Establish that critical mass necessary to attract a major CDMO, and more of that pharmaceutical industry will follow. So let's go to our next slide, please. Okay, so again, we've got one bioscience complex in the works and a second on the way. All of that is at the north end of the Discovery District and what we call our bioscience core. At the south end, Lifescape, an organization whose mission is to help children and adults with medically complex disabilities to lead fulfilling lives. That organization is planning to build about $62 million in facilities, including a hospital, a rehabilitation center, and really a whole new campus to replace its current 26th Street facilities in Sioux Falls. And I can tell you that in conversations with my colleagues in the pharmaceutical industry, the idea of the presence of a hospital of any size, of any focus on site at the Discovery District is very attractive to many pharmaceutical companies. So just the future presence of Lifescape is further helping to attract out-of-state bioscience industry to our site. And we'll go to the next slide, please. Then toward our broader mission of workforce development, we've got a lot in the works, and I won't cover all of it, but I'll give you a few examples. One example, I recently met with the new superintendent of the Sioux Falls School District, Dr. Jane Stavum, and we're working on a joint initiative to use the Discovery District as a platform, really a platform for training school teachers on concepts related to bioscience workforce development, and also for directly engaging some of our local students, earlier in their career development pathways. And we'll do all of this through a summer science and research program at the Discovery District. Now, I've also recently acquired funding from the Engineering Foundation and from the National Science Foundation to establish a biomedical engineering workforce development program at Lifescape and their patient equipment design and development facility, or what they fondly call their chop shop. This came out of a tour I took of Lifescape's facilities with their CEO, Steve Watkins, back in the spring. And by the way, I always have to say that I have seen a lot of organizations like LifeScape that work with medically complex children with disabilities throughout the world, but I've never seen anyone do it as well as LifeScape. It gives me goosebumps every time I talk about it. But anyway, while I was touring their chop shop, I said to Steve, there's a lot of IP sitting out here. Have you ever thought about, patenting and licensing any of these ideas? And he said, gosh, we're always beyond capacity here. So it's everything we can do just to keep up. So I asked him, what do you think of bringing in some students from USD's biomedical engineering program who can be trained, not only on the design and construction of patient enabling devices in the chop shop, but also on identifying new intellectual property and supporting the process of invention disclosures, patenting, licensing, and so on. And he was pretty excited about the idea. So we have charged forward and acquired, again, some external funding for this. And I've got to say, this is going to be a rare, one-of-a-kind experience for those college student interns. The significance of providing, such a service to the patients of LifeScape will really be career defining for many of those interns. And likewise, the service provided to LifeScape, combined with the potential revenue stream it could generate, really make this a win-win for our community. And then last example I'll throw in there, at the Discovery District, we've also partnered with academic programs at the University of South Dakota to develop new opportunities for training the next generation of bioscience and biodefense industry leaders. So then let's go to the next slide. Among our new industry collaborations, perhaps the most exciting is a program that's really designed to revolutionize the pharmaceutical industry by drastically reducing the costs of manufacturing therapeutics, while also establishing methods for taking manufacturing operations to the sites where the therapeutic products are most needed. And this is related to a concept I developed in industry that also has commercial applications for mobile field hospitals, mobile quarantine facilities, and even mass emergency vaccination centers, all particularly relevant with this ongoing pandemic. And then beyond the biosciences, this concept also has applications for establishing sustainable greenhouse operations for a future mission to Mars. So there's some cool stuff that can come out of this. So in addition to our industry collaborator, we've also been connected with Department of Defense and NASA in pursuing potential contracts there as well. I would love to share some of the details of that with you, and I promise I will maybe on next year's update with South Dakota Biotech. We haven't quite locked down all of the IP necessary to be able to talk publicly about all of it yet. But good, fun, exciting things going on there. And with that, I better wrap up our Discovery District updates. Are there any questions I can answer before I go on to today's panel discussion?
Mark, I did see a question was submitted. What's the biggest challenge you foresee in establishing the district, namely in recruiting companies?
Right now, and I'm sitting here right now and I'm looking out at, I think we've got beans growing out there this year and a little bit of corn. It is tough to attract, out-of-state industry in particular to a research park where there's not a whole lot coming up out of the ground yet. So the real challenge is first, are getting these first couple of buildings out of the ground so that, as we're working with some of these bioscience companies, we can actually bring them here and show them what we're capable of doing.
Yeah, so actually I find the same thing when I travel across the U.S. People don't realize the tremendous talent and possibilities that are here. And frankly, we're just trying to get them to understand that we have running water sometimes. It drives me crazy. So when they come, we're able to get them here. They're really impressed with what we've got. And I think the Discovery District by far and large will be a really big thing we can point to say, look at what we're doing here. It's pretty incredible. We're very blessed to have you as a leader here. And I'm excited to really be a part of this and watch you grow this, because I have no doubt that you will do a great job. There's a question is how do we connect with you? So maybe what the easiest way to do is to go ahead and reach out to me or South Dakota Bio, and I can connect you. Otherwise, Mark, do you want to give any of your contact information so they can reach out to you?
You bet. You know, my email is Mark with a K, mark.a.brown@usddiscovery.com.
Excellent. And I think there's a website also that you guys have that would probably has that information as well. So Mark, thank you so much for your update. We're going to get the other panelists queued in here, and you are actually going to be moderating it. So I'm going to have you put your next hat on and go ahead and introduce the panel and take it from there.
Okay, thanks, Joni. So we are honored to have really a great lineup for today's panel, and I'm really excited to hear from each of our panelists. So welcome to all of you joining us today for the panel. This is both obviously a challenging and an opportunity-laden time, and I want to underscore that, opportunity-laden time across our life science industries. And each of our panelists today is really a part of the vast network that helps keep that industry thriving. So before we turn it over to our panelists, I do want to take a moment to thank them, as well as all of those attending online for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. And I really hope you find the information shared in the panel to be helpful and informative. So to introduce you to our panelists, again, we're honored to be joined by Danny Mason, Director of Marketing and Communications at B9 Creations, Gary Larson, President of Electronic Systems, Inc., Kyle Bender from Falcon Plastics was planning on joining us, but has had to drop out, unfortunately, at the last minute. And then Ryan Carlson, the Site Director of Spartronics, will also be joining us. So each of our panelists will provide an overview of their company and how they partner with life science companies across the region. So first up, we have Danny Mason, again, Director of Marketing and Communications at B9 Creations. Danny?
Thank you, Mark and Joni, and we're so excited to be part of this opportunity to talk with you all. So as Mark said, I'm Danny with B9 Creations, and we're a global provider of additive manufacturing solutions. So I'm going to share a little bit with you about how 3D printing can bring your ideas to life and bring your products to market faster. And then I'm excited to give you an opportunity to hear from some of our customers and how they have used additive to enable their business in the medical device space. Scott will be sharing a little bit with you. He is a design technician at one of the world's largest medical device manufacturers, headquartered in Minneapolis. And then you'll hear from Kevin as well. And he's a senior engineer in advanced R&D at Johnson & Johnson. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So there's, just like any type of production technology, there's a lot of different types of additive manufacturing. And where we specialize is high precision medical grade additive. And so that's medical equipment compliant 3D printers, that's biocompatible and engineering materials, all targeted at high precision devices. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So as this global provider of digital manufacturing technology, we really have become the industry leader in this production, speed, and value in these high precision applications like medical, research, model making, prototyping and manufacturing, and jewelry. And we serve customers, strategic partners, and dealers in around 70 countries around the world. You can see some of our customers here. We partner with area folks like Monument Health here in Rapid City, where we're based, as well as the University of South Dakota. We've done some work with them as well. And then we have partners across the nation and world, from 3M and Medtronic to the National Institutes of Health, Procter & Gamble, Braun Medical, and the American Dental Association. Can you go to the next slide, please? So here's a preview of what that global expanse looks like in about 70 countries worldwide. And you can see our dealers here as well as our customers. And then that big triangle is where we're based in the Black Hills. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So a really good way to start is, how does additive change the way things get made? When you're bringing a part to market designed for manufacturing, traditional manufacturing says, how do we make this? and you start to design your part to fit within the design constraints and guidelines that production method necessitates. So this part here you can see on the left is actually 8 pieces that all have separate tools that they make, and then they assemble them together. This is great if your design is perfected and you're making millions of something, because then that's when the high cost of creating your part starts to make sense over the return of how many you're making. However, anytime you need to do a design tweak, or if you need just one of something, 10, thousands, it becomes pretty cost prohibitive. On the other side, design for additive manufacturing asks, what do we need this part to do? Because you're creating something additively versus using subtraction, you really don't have the same type of design constraints that you have in the traditional field. So you're able to design for form and function to what you need the part to do, not the constraints that are inherent in the production method. The other great thing is this cuts down on material costs, it cuts down on part weight, and you can incorporate in real time market feedback. You know, Mark was mentioning when you have an incubator and you're trying to get companies going from idea to prototype all the way to full-scale production, it'd be great to take all that feedback, tweak your design in real time for dollars of material in an hour versus having to do a high minimum order quantity because you might change it iteratively along the way. That way, by the time you get your device or whatever you're bringing to market ready for production, your design's not only perfected, it's customer validated. So you can ensure you have great product market fit. And so this part you saw with traditional manufacturing that was 8 pieces, on the other side, additively, it's now 1 piece. And it's 40% lighter and 20% stronger and finely tuned for what it's actually designed to do. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. One more back. Perfect. So I wanted to give you some more rubber meets the road examples of, okay, tell me what our customers actually using additive manufacturing for. So we have folks that are designing wearable health monitors for children, and they're 3D printing biocompatible enclosures for testing. So this is an example. This is an insulin pump enclosure. It's all 3D printed. It's biocompatible, so it can go against the skin for prolonged skin exposure up to a month. And they can do this for a couple dollars worth of material, and this part prints, you know, in a little over an hour. So you can start to see how you can speed up that testing. Other customers are using them to 3D print jigs and fixtures that hold parts together when you're assembling a product. We have folks that are gluing parts together with epoxy and 3D printing a fixture to hold it in place while it goes through that heat cure. And this allows you to be able to be really nimble. Back to that, how do I scale up manufacturing and not make it a bottleneck? This is another great way to use additive manufacturing. We have other customers who are designing and testing electronics for new pacemaker designs. And so they 3D print that external charging enclosure, and they can do that testing in real time. And then we've worked with pediatric orthopedic clinics to actually 3D print biocompatible finger splints that can be altered and tweaked, customized as the patient heals or grows. And again, that allows you just to do it in real time with less irritation than what might be caused by thermoforming plastic around that finger to hold it in place. A last example is one you can see on this quote here over on the side. So part of the advantage in using additive is not only being free to design it however you need to, but it's doing it cost effectively and rapidly. As you'll hear from some of our customers, often by the time they print a part, their design engineer already has a second design ready. So it needs to work iteratively to match that process of bringing a product to market. In this particular example, they just needed one part to do some testing with. And you can't do that traditionally, it's cost prohibitive. And even with outsourcing, they were being quoted thousands of dollars in weeks just to get this one part in-house. With our 3D printing technology, they were able to produce that in an hour for dollars. So now that you've heard me give you some examples, I want to give you the opportunity to hear from one of our customers. This is Kevin at Johnson & Johnson talking about why he chose to implement additive technology. Could you go to the next slide, please?
You know, there's a ton of printers out there in the market. And one of the things that, you know, our group does before purchasing a new printer is really trying to test capabilities. So I met the B9 sales team at a large trade show, and I reached out to them to try to get a test printout, and that's the part that you're looking at on the screen. As you can see by the envelope size, it's really small. It's 4 millimeters by 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters. And like Scott said, everything's going to miniaturization and getting smaller. So this part is actually representative of the size and features of a complex component that we use in our catheters. Honestly, when I reached out to them, I didn't think features would be resolved. And we've tried this in a bunch of other printers, but they turned around and sent this to me within the next day. So if you're looking at the part at the top, there's two 8-thou struts. It came out perfectly vertical. There's 3 holes horizontally along the body. Those are 3-thou in diameter by 6-thou deep, and those things resolve perfectly. And then the little 3 vertical holes on the bottom left, that's actually sitting on a fin that tapers all the way down to 1 thou. So it's really amazing to us that the technology now is really evolved so we can get these kind of parts within a few hours.
So I love that example, and I have the real part here. You can barely see it. And that's just one way we bring this impossible to life. You can see how small it is. This is at magnified 2,000%. You can see all of these intricate features that he's talking about, that they have a whole lab full of additive technology, 20, 30 printers. And what they really needed was something that could do high resolution repeatably and quickly. And that's why they chose to use additive for this. Our CEO uses this analogy a lot, where if you go to build a house, you don't back up your truck with one tool. Additive is the same way. And so seeing this whole cache of different types of printing technologies, none of them can do this high resolution part. And that's where we really aim to meet those needs. And through this relationship, they bought one of our commercial printers to be able to produce this. Since then, they've talked to us about, hey, what I really need is to be able to produce a flexible part. And so we're able to customize our technology to meet their needs, whether that's through developing a silicone-like material that they now use, or a semi-custom hardware that can print that. And that's just an example of that flexible production that's in line with what they're trying to do. Miniaturization is a huge macro trend in medical devices. And so having this technology in your back pocket that allows our customers to be on the forefront of their own industries is something that we find it's really fun and exciting, and it's a core part of who we are. So I'd love to share one other story with you. This is going to be Scott. So Scott works at a medical device manufacturer headquartered in Minneapolis, and he runs a $1 million 3D printing lab. Can you go to the next slide?
And these are just a couple examples I wanted to share with you guys. With my B9, I can finally confidently make these tiny features that typically I would fight. Like, I could get some of these, for example, look at the one I have labeled letter B. In the bottom right-hand corner of that gray part, that's 100,000 scale up that part's on top of. That's a 17,000 by 36,000 slot. I had other machines that I could do that with. If I had that machine absolutely perfect, if I had a beautiful resin tray, if I had brand new material, if the stars aligned, I could print that. Or on other machines, I could print that, but I would have to wait. That'd be a 20+ hour print. Well, now I can turn this thing around in an hour. And something else that's really interesting is I've been making it a habit. Let's say they order 10 of these, and I just run the first set, and I get them to them right away. I'll personally walk them and put them on their desk if they happen to be in my area. What happens a lot of times is before you finish that job, they'll come back down with the next version already. Stuff's moving that fast, and that's where we want to be. That's really nice to see. A couple other really interesting features on the A there. That's an OT 80 thread. I'm a machinist. I hated cutting threads like this. I wasn't a Swiss operator. Maybe for Swiss guys, this is super easy. But I had a design engineer who was getting quoted like weeks and thousands of dollars for that part. And she's like, I just want to test this one part. So we printed this thing. I actually had Joel print it for me first, because at first I didn't believe it was going to work. And we didn't even print that at the finest settings. That's the nominal settings on the B9 machine. And
so you hear that again, I need it to work, and I need it to print this seemingly impossible part. But what I also love about that is he says, I have other methods of production that can do this. but they take 20 hours. And by the time I walk my first one down, they have another one ready to go. And so being able to speed up that design iteration internally for a company that's working all the way from idea and concept to clinical tests to full-blown production, it's huge going from 20 to 1 hours. He also, when he works with us, talks a lot about loving the idea that he can now validate this, not just with, validate a part, not just with marketing and product management, but send it out to a nurse, get feedback from a physician, and allow all of those opinions and bettering of the product to be fed back to an engineer. Do that design tweak in real time, and all of a sudden you have a much better product by the time you are working through the regulatory hurdles to get it out to market. The other great thing is these materials, they're either biocompatible or they're sterilizable or they mimic real injection molding plastics, which to his point means you can do functional testing with a 3D printed part. Whereas before you would have to go produce like you are going to make a tool for it to be able to do that functional testing. You don't have to do that anymore. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So what can additive do for you? We've talked a lot about, and customers have shared this idea of design flexibility, better products, rapid prototyping. It's also a great means to have flexible production, whether it's the current pandemic we're in and we've seen those supply chain disruptions, or it could be a natural disaster, an economic issue. These types of disruptions are only going to keep happening, and having on-site manufacturing, Mark talked a little bit about that too. This importance of on-site manufacturing is huge, and 3D printing is a big enabler of that. It allows you to produce everything from thousands of parts for low volume or bridge production before you go to injection molding, to be able to have supply chain resiliency if you have a disruption. It's great for spare parts. It's wonderful if you have inventory and you don't need a lot, but it's really expensive, or it has a very long lead time, or every time you order that part, you have to order a really high minimum order quantity. You can start to eliminate all of that by using 3D printing in those cases. It also enables stakeholder success. This is what we're talking about with real-time feedback from customers, early product market fit. It's wonderful as educational tools. We have hospitals printing anatomical models, parts, things like that, not only as a substitute instead of using cadavers and as a training and educational model, but also on the surgical side. Print an actual patient model allows you to visualize what it is you're working with before you go into the operating room, but reduces your operating time. It gives you better patient outcomes. It allows for faster healing. All of those things are how 3D printing are being used today to make all of the stakeholders successful. And then there's a whole idea of customization, whether it's customized to the patient, customized to your market need, or tailored to your application. Like with Johnson & Johnson, where they bought a commercial product that enabled them to produce that catheter component, but then came back to us and said, hey, I really need a machine and a material that can do this. And we were able to help them there as well. Do you want to go to the next slide? So if you want to do a deeper technical dive or really have an in-depth conversation about how can you help me? I'm trying to bring my new product to market, or I have an idea and I'm not sure how to conceptualize it, or I'm running into these prototyping and manufacturing challenges. We want to help. We're a South Dakota company, and we want to help all other South Dakota companies that are here as well. So we're going to do a virtual session, if you'd like to join us, exclusive just to Biotech Summit members. And I'm going to bring in our engineering and product specialists, product manager, folks that understand all of it, whether it's the design and engineering or the manufacturability or what materials would be best suited to what I'm trying to do. And you can sign up at b9c.com/meetup. And we will have that in-depth conversation. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Danny. Well, that is really, really exciting. I'll definitely join that virtual session. And we've got several questions for you. I'll save all the questions until the end, just to make sure we've got plenty of time for all of our presenters, but we'll circle back to those. So now let me introduce Gary Larson, again, president of Electronic Systems Incorporated. Gary?
Good afternoon, Mark. Can everybody hear me?
You bet. Yeah, we can hear you great.
All right. Thank you. First off, I have to say we are proud to be a supplier of B9 Creations. So They are one of our customers, have been one of our customers for several years now. So thank you, Danny. And I also have to apologize. I'm not a marketing guy, and my presentation is not near as colorful as hers. I'm an engineer with an MBA, so it'll be pretty boring. Anyway, with that said, I'm Gary Larson, president and one of the owners of Electronic Systems. I've been in the electronics manufacturing business for 33 years. The last 21 of them been with Electronic Systems. Today, I'm going to give you an overview of our company, what we do, the services we provide to the medical industry, and hit on a couple of key services we provide to some of our key markets. With that, let's get started. Next slide, please. All right, you're going to hear me say this more than once today. We are an electronic manufacturing service provider. We look and feel like an electronics manufacturing company, but we are a service provider. We provide the service of assembling and building our customers' product for them. It always starts with a circuit board assembly and goes from there depending on the level of assembly they like to see. We were established in 1980. We've been in business for 40 years. We got to celebrate that this year. As I mentioned, everything we do here starts with a custom circuit board assembly of some type. We build it to the level our customer desires, and in some cases, we build it to a complete product system and order fulfillment to our customers. So as far as the services go, I will elaborate on some of these later, but we start with design if our customers need it, and we'll take it all the way through complete order fulfillment and ship to whatever level they'd like us to ship to. We're a privately held S Corp. I'm one of the owners. We got other owners located here in Sioux Falls, all closely held. We have 250 people and 3 facilities, again, all located right here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The markets we focus on and serve are industrial, commercial, the medical, biotech, energy, agriculture, transportation, HVAC, and it's quite diverse markets, but very similar in technology and requirements. Most all these products are high technical, very ruggedized environment, high reliable applications, fixed installations, expected to work every time, all the time, whenever they're put to use. So no consumer, no low end, no throwaway products. Next slide. This is a quick pie chart of our market. Most notably at the bottom, the biotech medical is about 25% of our market and growing. And just note on the top, agriculture is about 10, and there are some crossover in those two, especially when you get into the research and development areas. So those are both expanding markets for us. Next slide, please. All right, some more details about the company. We're a lean enterprise manufacturing company. What does that mean, and who cares about that? Well, we operate under the parameters of eliminating waste wherever we can, and that's of course very important to our customers, and particularly controlling costs and any waste that we have within our systems and in our processes and our build processes ultimately get passed on. So eliminating waste is a big culture for us, ensuring that the product is built for the best economic value that our customers desire. We're ISO 9001, ISO 13485, which for this particular audience, the 13485 is the medical biotech certification, which ensures that we are compliant with all the medical and FDA standards. And of course, listening to Wade's previous discussion from NASA, certainly want to audit your supplier regardless of their certifications, and we are audited by our customers on a regular basis. And of course, we have a third-party registrar who audits us to certify our systems are compliant. And then we have soldering standards, which again is very critical to the medical industry. Class 2, Class 3 is the highest level soldering standards in the industry to comply with the medical requirements. And lastly, Sharp certified facility. Some people may say, well, who cares about that? Well, it's the highest level of safety you can be certified in a manufacturing facility. So we care about that. Our customers care about that. It's and again, enables us to operate in a safe environment at a low cost for our customers. Next slide, please. All right, I contemplated whether I would include this slide, but now I'm glad I did after listening to Wade's presentation. ESI cultures, this is what you get when you deal with us. And it's ultimately important that if you're outsourcing, particularly a medical device, a rocket, whatever it might be, you understand the culture of that supplier that you're using to build that for you, or provide that part, provide that subassembly, whatever it may be. This is what you get when you deal with us. Is legendary integrity, responsiveness, flexibility, and it all boils down to legendary service. And just want to, I have a wonderful quote from one of our original principal investors who helped start the company. And this if Wade's listening and he hears this, I think it'd be much appreciated. But he said regarding integrity, no matter how hard you try, you can't make a good deal with a bad guy. So our business is focused on that. We provide a highest level of service possible. And we use the word legendary because we want people to talk about it. That's how it gets from one person to the next. If it's a personal thing, if you get service anywhere, you ultimately want the best service possible. And most of the time when you receive exceptional service, you tell somebody about it. So that's our business model, and that's served us well for 40 years. So next slide, please. All right, what are some of the medical and biotech and life science products that we build? And there's a multitude of them. I've just got a few of them highlighted here and what they do. Some blood monitoring, diagnostics, some pumps, some treatment systems, some research and development instruments. Matter of fact, one of the instruments that we're providing the circuit board assemblies for now is they're using it in some the coronavirus virus imaging, and it's very interesting stuff. It's what I classify it as. We do not make life-sustaining medical products. We make life-enhancing products. It's all Class 2 medical. Throughout the pandemic, we were fortunate to stay up and operating and continue to supply these products to our customers. Most importantly, some of our customers were in the front lines actually using some of the blood products on critical ill patients, and we were recipient of several thank you notes, so helped our people have a good appreciation for what they're doing here. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, what do we do for these medical customers of ours? Well, this is a snapshot of all the services that we provide, and there's too many of them to go into the details. But one of the things I wanted to highlight on this slide was the biggest challenge that we see in our market, and it's not just medical customers, but is how do I get this, put thousands of hours of research and development into designing this product and coming forward to solve this problem in the market, and particularly medical. How do I get this product off the design engineer's bench, and how do I get it commercialized and industrialized to be producing it at the levels that the market desires? Well, that's what we do. That's what we do. We do that from start to finish for our customers. So starting at the top, doing a new product introduction, we'll take and build that first prototype build off the engineer's bench. We'll provide that feedback to the engineer as to how it went, what were some issues from a design standpoint, what were issues from a manufacturing standpoint, what were issues possibly from a test and validation standpoint. And at that point in the product development process is where you really refine the design and solidify it from a quality, producibility, and cost standpoint. Oftentimes, if you go to market and you start the manufacturing process and got the design release, it's too late to refine it and take costs down and narrow down the quality issues and refine the design for production. And along with that, we have a whole staff of engineers that provide engineering technical support for our customers' designers. And once it gets past the stage of release to production, And we manage the supply chain for our customers, which I have another slide on that. We'll elaborate further. And again, risk mitigation is a big deal in the medical business too, that I'll touch on. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier the ISO certifications. Those are a big piece of the business systems that we have to ensure that we are doing what we say we are doing. And of course, like Wade had mentioned in his presentation with NASA, you have to come in, audit, and perform those audits to ensure we're doing what we say we're doing. But a big piece of that for the medical world is the certification of the production folks and the assembly folks who are building those medical products, and ensuring that we have those records and retention of their training records. And we can also have retention of the records of who built the product, when the product was built, track it down to the lot code of the build and the builders who were involved in building that. Again, to mitigate risk if there's any issues with the product as it was issued to the field and installed. You can trace it back to a specific build, a specific lot code, a specific date code, and how many were built at that time. Regarding the medical standards and the records and the risks, again, external audits are performed. It's a must. It has to be on the quality management systems. The ISO 1345, as I mentioned, ensures we're compliant with the FDA standards and our customer standards. Some of our customers have standards above and beyond what the FDA has. And so we'll provide certificates of compliance to those medical customers to ensure that the product is built exactly the way they had defined it. And we also have record retention according to the medical requirements. Some of the records are retained for the lifetime of the product, and or as long as our customers request it. Risk review and mitigation, that's a big deal in the manufacturing side of the business. We review the build process when we initially start the production. We evaluate the possibilities of failure in the manufacturing process and identify those and work with the customer from a design perspective and a manufacturing process perspective to eliminate those. So when the process is set up to build the medical product, to build the medical device, whatever it is, that process is free as much as it can be of variables. And once that process is set, it stays forever until the customer comes with an engineering change or documentation change that says it authorizes the change and moves forward. And oftentimes there are qualification builds, and several customers have different terminologies for the trial builds or proto builds or pilot builds to ensure that that change is rigid and will not introduce new problems into their products. Next slide, please. Okay, materials management, supply chain management. This is a big part of what we do, and kind of plays off of NASA and selection of a supplier. And so the customer relies on us to manage the supply chain. It's a big part of what we do. And of course, it's all fresh with us right now, but the pandemic, if it did anything, it identified weaknesses in your supply chain this year. There's no doubt. If you had a weak link in your supply chain, it surfaced very quickly. And I think Danny mentioned too, you know, we've, over the years in manufacturing, we've dealt with many disruptions of all types: political unrest, natural disasters. We had the electronics industry had a tsunami in Japan several years ago that shut down a lot of manufacturing. So we've been dealing with this supply chain disruptions our entire life. So the pandemic was just another one. And our whole materials management model is based off of minimizing those disruptions and the risks involved with those. And of course, a big part of that is working closely with our suppliers and developing partnerships. And it's not us versus them. Our suppliers are part of our business. We bring them into our business model and they work with us. And a couple of examples, just recently with the disruption with the pandemic, a lot of us customers and our suppliers were looking at, a +1. I have offshore +1, but basically looking at the current supplier. Is it single sourced? Where can I get this? Can I get it anywhere else if I can't? you know, what can I do? Can I bring part of it over here to a domestic source? Can I, in that last mile, can I get a warehouse here to store it for me? Maybe a month's worth, maybe 2 months worth to, again, to prepare for the next disruption. And it's just creating that redundancy and risk mitigation to ensure that you don't stop. And the products we build, circuit board assembly, it can have 1,000, 1,500 components on it. It only takes one component not to be able to build that product for our customers. So having that resiliency and redundancy in the supply chain is critical. And of course, at the bottom, some of the basic tools we use, but they're important. The supplier management program, we use scorecards to measure our suppliers and communicate with our suppliers. And if they're delinquent in any area, we work with them to bring up those delinquencies and work together to ensure, again, they're part of our business model, a big part of our business model. And if we're only as good, I always say we're only as good as our weakest supplier. If we have a bad supplier, we can't support our customers. So we work closely with our customers on their demand management of what do they need for quantities and orders. And we have customer focused purchasing and planning within our facility that works with our customers. And a big part of the medical is lot tracing. I mentioned earlier that we have the records. We can trace down the exact component from the manufacturer, where it was built, when it was built, what production lot it was used on in our facility. Again, it's for exposure and risk mitigation to ensure that the customer has issues in the field. We can track it down to, hey, there was 50 boards, 50 assemblies built with this component. That's your maximum exposure. And then some straightforward Kanban, bonding, visibility, stocking things that we do for our customers. What level they want, we'll do. Next slide, please. All right, I wanted to end it on this, and pretty simple business model, but the Tom Peters business management consultant, years gone by, he's still consulting, but back in the 80s, he was known for saying it's all about relationships, and it really is. Our business model is built on relationships, and the pandemic highlighted that more now than ever. You know, who could you count on this year when you were in trouble? And I think the medical world felt that pretty hard. Who can I go to? Where can I get these built? We couldn't build ventilators here because we didn't have the capacity, didn't have the domestic capacity. I mean, so having the relationships, knowing who you can call, who's on your short list, that's how we do business. We consider ourselves an extension of our customer's factory because that's what we are. They don't have the capabilities, nor do they want to add them to their factories or their facilities, so we do it for them. Great deal of trust involved. We take all the work off the customer's desk. We do it for them. They don't have to worry about it. And we provide a low-risk domestic source. We've been doing it for 40 years. So just a couple quick stats off of our website. 20 years, we have 37% of our customers been with us over 20 years, and 45 been 10 to 20. So that's just a testament of our business and how we work with our customers and the markets that we serve. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Look forward to any questions.
Thanks, Gary. So your presentation sparked several questions. Again, we'll follow up at the end with that. And I'd also like to follow up on this, on the idea of supply chain issues related to the pandemic with all of the panelists. I'm really curious to hear what the other panelists have to say about that. But first, we finally have Ryan Carlson, the site director at Spartronics. So Ryan, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thanks a lot. Can you hear me okay?
You bet.
All right, fantastic. All right, thanks for having me today. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about Spartronics. And everybody says, well, who's Spartronics? And I'll get to that here in a second. But I grew up in Brookings, so I'm a local guy. Went to South Dakota State University. Sorry, I know it's not an official sponsor, but I took a really great biomedical engineering class from Dr. Lou Brown there. And he really sparked my interest in something with electronics, but I couldn't really do the medical. So how could I get them together? And he gave me an option that I could see in the future that, oh, this would be something I could get into. And so I went to work for a company called Benchmark Electronics in Winona, Minnesota for 8 years. Came back to South Dakota in 2005 and worked for a small company called OEM Worldwide. Changed names, been purchased, all those kind of things over the last couple of years. Went through a Spartan phase, and now we're known as Spartronics. So long story short, it's good to be here. We've been in the industry for quite a while, so I'm excited to keep going here in Watertown and have this option as a highly technical biomedical engineering company here for the organization in South Dakota and also for the city itself. Next slide, please. Spartronics, again, I hate going last because it's kind of like a Me Too kind of a display. And so I'm going to try to do something a little bit different here, but we are a contract manufacturing company. It's exciting because we see all kinds of different companies, all kinds of different products. I get to try new things. We are a bigger part of a bigger company, or a small part of a bigger company, sorry. In Watertown here, we are part of 8 different divisions, including a Vietnam low-cost facility, and then a few design centers across the nation as well. We started as a printed circuit board company. We have grown as our customers demanded and asked us, can you do a little bit more than that? We're building their products at a deeper level than we were, I'd say 5-10 years ago. And this really drives that need, like you said, for audits and UL and Intertech coming in to say, are you doing the right things? And the FDA to say, did you do the right things? And it's all a lot of fun and joy in that. But what that brings us then is a great way to really know and get into deep with our customers and understand their products at a much deeper level. And go to the next slide. We do cover 3 markets along that. And the Watertown facility is 50% medical, 50% instrument control. We don't get into the commercial aerospace. It's really more of a Florida, California facility, but I had to use the standard deck as an intro to who Spartronics is, so they remain a part of what we can do. Like I said, though, we really focus on life science. I'm going to stick to that and showing you some of the products that we build in the next couple slides. Go ahead. Looking at large facility type movement, chairs and treatment type of ideas to more benchtop, tabletop diagnostic. Next slide again shows the more handheld, maybe a little smaller, again, very diagnostic ideas of who the corporation as a whole we build. I'm going to go directly now to Watertown and why is South Dakota of interest in the medical industry. So next slide is, now we're going to start focusing on just Watertown and why are we here? What makes us special? There's about 250 people in the facility, and it's really great. It's a good number for Watertown. And of that, we get 60 some people are technical in nature of some kind. Usually a 2-year degree, 4-year degree, whatever it ends up being, electrical, mechanical, a mix of the two. And predominantly they have ties to South Dakota. If you want, somebody to come and stay and to really invest themselves, that ends up being who stays in South Dakota. They want a technical place to work. They want to apply their skills into something that has a long-lasting impact in the world. And so that's what we are for them. It's very important that we stay controlled. ESD is a big deal. And it's a part of the circuit board assembly. But I really want to get into, rather than just what is a circuit board, well, what kind of products do we do and why do our services matter to our customers? So the next slide really goes and shows from start to finish what we get involved with. And like they were saying, Gary was saying, supply chain early on development is important. Aftermarket services are very important for repair, refurbishment, ongoing support. We have to cover whatever the customer asks us to do. And so that might just be a circuit board. It might be into the subassembly or maybe top level assembly. And for some customers, it's a finished product going into the field and into distribution. They never even see it. They don't touch it. They trust us to take care of that. And that comes with its own challenges and risks. And so in order to mitigate those, I want to do more of a case study today is what do we do at Spartronics here in Watertown to mitigate these risks and to make this feasible for us to own product long-term? How do I get a wide variety of product to work in a factory that I have to sustain and keep their lifespan up for 10, 15 years, maybe longer than that? So whether it be a large customer, the big blocks, the ones that everybody knows and loves that have blue in their logo, or if it's ones that are smaller startups that have the same needs, I have to follow a standard process. And so I really have to know, what are they asking for and what's my value proposition for that? Next slide kind of gives me that breadth, is that I have to live in a quality and engineering culture. They do not want to come hold my hand. They don't want to figure things out for me and then tell me what to do. They need us to be interactive. They need us to be strategic. They need us to understand their industry and to utilize the test suites, the software, the items that are required in the industry to run, and then to add it to their product as a value proposition. And so that's been really fun, because then I get to know their products better, and I get to know the customers better, and I get to know them better. And it brings an interesting opportunity for them to say, great, let's go to see South Dakota, because I'm going to audit my supplier, but it's between the months of March and October. And that's how we do it. So we have a lot of visitors in the summer to see us, to come value, and the winters are real slow, but I'm sure y'all have the same cross to bear on that one. Again, this drive to quality, then I'm going to walk through just a real quick product realization of, I took this product from this customer, and it was about 10 years ago now that I started this, and how has it affected them, and what have I done to make it, or how have we worked to make this an ongoing process? I did very little. The team does all this work, of course. So the next slide is a demonstration of a handheld medical device. Starts an IV into your bone marrow, in short, and it's not a very pleasant process, but the time you need this, you as a patient don't care so much. It really is in your veins are collapsed, and you can't start an IV in your arm. Very, very price sensitive in how they wanted it built. It goes into every ambulance. There's probably 5, 10, 50 of them in a hospital. Who knows? I honestly don't. But they have to be rugged, but they don't want to pay a lot for them. And it's a great, how are we going to solve this process? Of course, it's an FDA submitted product, so it has to be fully component traceable. It has to look good, it has to feel good, it has to work correctly, of course. And oh, by the way, it needs a 10-year lifespan on the battery operated process. And it needs to be audited by Brazil and some of the other, it's all over the world, frankly. And so, oh, and by the way, we started as a startup company, and then it's moved to one of the big block companies. So the changes in this life cycle had to endure this launch. And so when you look at the risk assessment, what is my problems? Where are the potential issues going to be? Because it's price sensitive, I have to make sure I know that I'm going to invest the money correctly in the right suppliers that can do the work, but in a way that doesn't cost a lot of money. And so the assessment of risk on your supply chain is got to be the first start. Do the suppliers know what they're doing? Just like they talked about in the previous ones, demonstrations here of, are the suppliers capable of producing the parts, and do they create parts like this already so it's not a new invention for them? And so we identified a plastic supplier that really could give us the qualified validated molding. The outputs are measured and verified, and they could do it in a way that's traceable all the way to the lot codes. And that was a very key element. And we found out, hey, by the way, regrind in plastics is not an important thing. I didn't even know they reground plastics. And so we learned a lot with the supplier, bringing us up through this process, because at the moment we weren't very experienced in plastics molding. We all learn a lot with that. So that was a great, interesting understanding of how a supplier risk assessment can help you succeed long-term in this product. All right, next question then is, go ahead, next slide, yep. How do I build this now? And that's the next set of risks, the manufacturing process plan. It starts with a circuit board, typically always for us, and then they want us to solder some wires and the battery and a switch, and then it all gets shoved into a 5 pounds of potatoes into a little teeny cradle there, sonic welded, and then we have to do a functional test to make sure it spins correctly, and the right rotation is very important as well. So if you wire that backwards, it could go the wrong way, and that it actually doesn't work so good with the needle. So there's a lot of critical items in here that we had to learn from our customers. And in order to do this efficiently, I have to panelize that little teeny PCBA into a 40, 90 up panel to cut apart and use later on so that the machine lines are utilized correctly. I can't do it one at a time. So how that product flows to the manufacturing process is very important to understand so that I can minimize the extra steps that aren't needed, the waste involved, and then I have to understand how it's built. So I couldn't just give this to an operator. There's a lot of understanding involved. And the first time we built it, it didn't work so good, actually. It didn't fit right. And so we had to use 3D printing to quickly turn new ideas and new thoughts. We had to use the engineering builds to say, is this even feasible? What are my time studies? And then I turn over to operations so they can find all the things that I didn't understand and know the first time around. They can tell me what I didn't know, which was very enlightening for our guys. And then as we come into real prototypes where they build up 50 or 100 of these, you find out what you really don't know is that, okay, when you do this, this is the fatigue points. This is the issues that don't come up correctly. This is the fixturing I might need. This is the problems when I put it into the box. When I fold the boxes, it takes too long. How can we fix that? It's the silliest things that can absolutely sink your flow line. And so we had to understand all the risks involved with this. And that's all tied to the PFMEA, as in process failure mode effects analysis. Really fancy way of saying what's going to go wrong when I build this product. You put a risk to it. How often does it happen? What's the impact of this? And then I asked the customer to say, well, if this happens and I can't find it, how bad is that to the patient? And if I can't figure that out, I better put some in process places to test it, to verify it, to inspect and understand that it didn't happen so that there's no call escapes to the field. That's the worst case scenario. And then once you've actually got it all nailed down, you're ready to go into a qualification build of large volumes with production operators, with release manufacturing instructions. And you say, all right, I'm ready to go to production. Let's launch after that. And then you find out what lean means, because now you want to take some cost out of it because it wasn't exactly what you had in mind and it's not near as efficient as you want. So next slide then kind of shows what happens next is you create this flow, you have workstations, you identify your time studies, what part of which assembly took how much time. You want to minimize your operators while maximizing your output. You have to understand what happens next and where am I going to go with that. And then at the end of that, it's say, well, how am I going to sustain this for 200, 300 nights? How many shifts do I need in order to build this? What's the variability in my operation schedule? All these kind of interesting things come into play as you launch products. And so this is one of those things that we had to work through, and you can see the time study chart up in the upper right-hand corner. We had a large lean activity. We found out that though our standard flow of building the circuit boards and then soldering the wires was in a different department than this department, our product ended up walking about 3 miles before it finished its final process. So as our lean activity showed, if I brought the circuit boards to the cell and did all the work inside the cell, it actually turned into like 100 feet. Like, wow, gee, that was easy. How hard was that, right? But at the time of launch, there was no time to think through this. It was all about producing products. So it's important that you have a sustainability plan to look at the cost long term. I think I covered all my notes here. Next slide then says, all right, well, what things did you do in order to make this go? Give me some real examples. So we're looking at, again, 3D printing of jigs and presses and how do I test and fixture this up so the operators aren't fatigued in their process assembly. You're doing 300 a night. That's 300 solder joints for that one battery terminal. And that isn't good for them to be holding on to things and trying to keep the battery from falling on the floor or things like that. So we did some real just neat fixtured assembly jigs that they pass that down the row until they stuff it into the little plastics part. We had to make sure that the test method was foolproof. It's automated. You've got to take the speed results and the battery voltage results and put them right into the device history records so that they're auditable later on. We had to make sure that visual management came into play so they knew if they were on tack or off tack, or the work instructions, are they effective? Are they understandable? Now I'm going to add maybe English as a second language type workers. So you can't put a whole bunch of words in there, so pictures are worth 1,000 words. How do you communicate that to a process flow where turnover is a concern in operations? And so you have to make sure that it's trainable also later on. There's a birthing of serial numbers all the way through the scanning of process. The next step, next slide then, kind of shows the work instructions specifically. I have to have the prep parts detailed differently than the build parts and the packaging and what needs to be in there. Because again, the customer's not going to review this. They're not going to retest it. The first time it gets taken out of the box, it's going to go into a bag of an EMT operator, and it's got to work right off the bat. And so the understanding of where this is going in the end is very important for the release and the build of these kind of products. And so we get stories back from the field where my daughter fell in the pool and she was non-responsive, and the EMTs came, and because of this drill, she's living today. And boy, those are hard to hear and to think, well, what if I didn't do that right? What if it didn't work the way we wanted it to? That's hard, and you all understand that as medical professionals. That's a very, very big deal. Personally speaking, after the Haiti earthquakes in 2010, group of us went out there, and Teleflex Vidicare, the company who makes this, sent a whole pallet over for them to use in the cholera outbreak that happened. And so we got to see them in use, and I talked to doctors and how important this was for them to work in the field, because they weren't even trained EMTs to use these things. So they were trying these things out for the first time on patients or on themselves as demonstrations for the nurses. It's crazy when you get out of your factory and see how the field is impacted by your product. So that was, for me, a very personal and an amazingly awesome opportunity to see stuff for real. And I tell it all the time here, and people are probably sick of hearing it, but it's the reality of our product. And so final test and acceptance is the most important thing we can do, so that when it hits the field, it does exactly what the customer first wanted 5 slides ago. This is my product, I love it, and it needs to be perfect. This is jewelry we're making for them, not just a circuit board assembly or not just a top level product. On the flip side, or the last part of this then, next slide, is when it's done, how do I know it's done right? And device history record is really the part of that we try to minimize operator choices, automate tests as much as possible, store the results online so that when the FDA comes knocking, this is a very easy conversation, not a dance. I never want to see my company in a slide deck by the guy who talked earlier about, well, this guy was fabricating results. Boy, that'd be horrible, right? And he never started there, but boy, it was hard to do the right thing. And we try to do this as the easiest way for operators to do the right thing without being watched or audited or verified, so that I can be real confident that what I'm going to get out is what I expected to get out. That's kind of a real high level. Again, there's a million stories, there's a million customers, a million products that are out there that we could talk through this on. But the next slide just kind of wraps it up, is that we are a facility, a strong facility for doing medical devices, FDA regulated ones, all the way through distribution. We have to offer our low cost manufacturing to Vietnam, because our customers are saying, if you don't do this, you will not stay in business. So we like to launch it here in Watertown, and then give opportunities to go overseas should that come up. And that's it's really how we as Spartronics feel like we can offer more to our customers than just a manufacturing company. All right, thank you so much for having me here, and love to answer any questions.
Thanks, Ryan. That was really, really cool. I love the Haiti example. It's so rare with clinical applications, obviously, to actually get to see your product, at use in the field. So that's a great story. Well, we do have some time for questions, so I will jump right in with what we've gotten so far. And Danny, this first question is for you. It says, early designs often don't have requirements completely defined. How do you work with your customers to get what they think they want?
Yeah, so it's back to that, not just producing a part, but trying to understand what is the intended function of this. Where is it in that manufacturing flow, and at what stage, so that we can offer advice, whether that's strictly design for additive, or how do I start to have some iterations where I know where I can do failure analysis on it. I can do functional testing. I can do low run and have it go back in manufacturing to see if there are gaps, all the way through lean manufacturing. Just like, Ryan and Gary talked about, that's pretty core to to us as well. And it's funny, and we were just talking about this internally, where folks know how to do this, but when it comes to 3D printing, they like throw it out the window, you know, all of the manufacturing lessons they've learned, and it becomes this magic technology. Instead, it's exactly what Ryan's talking about. It's exactly what Gary's talking about. And so being able to implement the technology in the manufacturing process they already have today ends up being a lot of that requirement consulting we do, not just how can I design a part additively to, you know, deliver better customer outcomes or more cost effectively. So it really tends to be both of those.
That's great. Thank you. Gary, a question for you. What are the biggest challenges when outsourcing the manufacturing of a medical device?
The biggest challenges I think that we see from our customers are understanding a documentation package that they need to have to turn it over to somebody outside their four walls to build that product for them. A lot of times the development process is moving quick and fast, and sometimes the documentation doesn't keep up with the design as it moves through the development stages. Getting that documentation package solidified and ready to pass on to somebody else that you can ask to build it and trust they'll build it to that package according to their specifications. That's probably the biggest challenge. And you know, there's hundreds of them, and Ryan probably has 100 more too. But I think that's where it starts, especially in the medical world. You have to have it well documented. The bill of material has to be defined. You have to buy to the approved vendor listing and manage those vendors. So in our world, you know, and I'm not sure any other people experience this a lot. Ryan and I can definitely relate to it. We have a lot of counterfeit parts that infiltrate our supply chain. So ensuring that you're not getting counterfeit components that are being somehow slid through the supply chain is another big issue. So having the documentation, having the suppliers in place to make those parts of those documents and those prints is critical.
Great. Ryan, do you have anything to add to that? The biggest challenges when outsourcing the manufacturing of a medical device?
Yeah, that's a big one right there. Gary nailed it. And I'm going to say on the opposite side, or another element of that, is how to communicate how important it is to build this product exactly the way it's done without understanding it yourself. So how do I understand what this product does? What's the intent of the product? You know, why do you want it done this way? Why does it have to be just like this? The operations teams, they'll do what they can, but they have an idea of how it could be done better. You're like, yeah, you can't just change the ideas on this. You have to build it this way for this reason. That message is really hard to get out to everybody so they grasp that.
Thanks, Ryan. And another question for you, Ryan. You know, what recommendations do you have for new startups in your industry when it comes to partnering with the bioscience industry?
Yeah, that's a hard one. The first, there's a million things I could offer, right? Documentation is a big part of it because you think you're going to remember this for forever, but a year from now you have moved on to the next design. And if you want your contract manufacturer to love this baby you just handed me as much as you loved it, I really need to understand why that is done that way. And you can move on to something different then. If we need to call you up every single other day to say, you know, why was that again? Because it's really not written down anywhere. Or, you know, I don't understand why you really want this way. And you have to go find your design engineer again, if he's even still there, to re-explain that. That can be very, very hard for your company to sustain itself. And I would say that the second one, because there's always another really good one, is make sure they understand your story. And like Danny said, what do you want it to do? Don't tell me exactly how to do it. What do you want it to do? And let me help you innovate. Because you're a small company, you don't have the horsepower to think outside the box. Maybe we can help you. As long as we know why you want to do what you should be doing, we can get you there.
Thanks, Ryan. Danny, a question for you. Do you utilize FDM printers, SLA printers, or both? And what are the most common materials you use for your 3D prints?
Yeah, so our technology is actually DLP, which means is there's a pixel grid and an industrial light engine. And when you take a part like this, you slice it into a bunch of layers and you turn those pixels on and off at each layer, and that's what forms the part. That's how you get super high precision printing, is it's like a flashlight right up against the wall. All of the edges are super crisp. You know, as you pull that flashlight away, they get blurrier. So that's really the type of technology that we have. Its closest partner would be SLA and not FDM. So it's liquid photopolymer plastic. We do no metal. And then when that light shoots up, it hardens that plastic. That's how you get your final in-use parts. So that's a type of technology. The most common materials, it really depends on what you're trying to do with your part. So we have a suite of design materials that are engineered for rapid prototyping. They print very quickly. You can get, you know, quick validations. Another really common bucket are engineering materials. So those mimic whatever you use to producing. You know, this is like a silicone, so it's super flexible, fast response time. We have nylon-like materials, ABS-like materials. And then kind of the third bucket, I would say, in the life sciences industry is everything biocompatible. So if you're trying to do something with blood filtration, right, you need biocompatibility. Or if you're trying to do something that's going to be a health monitor or an external enclosure that touches skin, you need biocompatibility. So those are the three buckets. And then in some other industries we serve, we have materials that you can cast into metal as well.
Very neat. Thanks, Danny.
Mm-hmm.
Gary, a question for you. At what point in the product life cycle should a medical biotech company engage with a contract manufacturing company?
Well, in my experience, in my opinion, I think as early as possible, as early in the design stage as possible. Don't wait. If you do not have, if you're a biotech company and you're headed down the path of developing a medical device of something to solve a problem in the medical world, you know how to solve that problem, but you don't know how to manufacture it. You should involve the manufacturer, the contract manufacturer, as early as possible in all of the design reviews. And even if you're not ready to start building, you should start including whoever the sources may be. And a lot of companies like us, and I'm sure Spartronics same way, will provide that design for manufacturing, those design for testing, validation, just as a open service without any cost tied to it. So lean on the contract manufacturer as the expert to manufacture this. You can be the expert to design it, but knowing the application but then turn over the manufacturing portion to the contract manufacturer as soon as possible, as early as possible. A lot of companies, not just in the medical industry, it's all industries, they like to hold on to that as long as they can, and they'll say, okay, now I'm ready to turn it over for manufacturing. Well, you need to start sooner than later. That's all I would say.
Thanks, Gary. This next question is for all of the panelists. What are the unique challenges that you found in working with bioscience partners versus other industries? And Danny, we can start with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, it's regulatory exists in different industries, but obviously that presents its own unique challenges in the life science industries as well. You know, I find a lot of it too is you might be working with an advanced R&D team and an R&D team who doesn't really talk to the product designers who don't really know what it takes to go to full manufacturing because they're siloed. And so a lot of it is helping bridge those gaps. Or if you're with an early stage startup, you know, it might be, I don't even know how to go from idea to prototype 1. And then how do I scale that? And how do I get validation and then move on? So I'd say part of those challenges is understanding the unique medical environment that this has to exist in, because the R&D engineer might not care about its end use environment. They're just trying to get, you know, initial fit. But when you go and you work with a contract manufacturer, they absolutely need to. And because there's these layers of a manufacturer and a contract manufacturer and a customer, you also have to make sure that when you're doing those design for manufacturing or design for additive manufacturing type of reviews, you're getting apples to apples with all those layers, so that by the time you have your full medical device, you make sure that you've done all of that work. So some of those are the unique challenges, I would say, which may not be that unique to life sciences, but it definitely has its own environment and regulatory and multiple different manufacturers that go into that.
Thanks, Danny. Ryan, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd add on to that. Those are all really good, so I can't really expound upon those at all. But I'm going to say long-term sustainability of products is also a huge challenge. And when I come back to say, hey, by the way, your component went obsolete, it wasn't my idea to make it go obsolete. It just did. Or, by the way, the manufacturer forgot to order parts, or SABIC decided they didn't want to ship resin anymore. So I'm sorry. Those kind of very focused, frantic discussions are very hard because it's regulatorily impactful. It is a design engineering nightmare to try to redesign on the fly. Oh, and by the way, your marketing team is really mad at you. So it gets very intensive very quickly when a supply chain issue pops up, like obsolescence or last time buys or redesign or even field failures and what that means. So that's probably, for me, that's my biggest nightmare, is those kind of things popping up when I didn't expect them.
Thanks, Ryan. Thoughts on this, Gary?
Yeah, I guess I would say it kind of folds into both these answers, is that the rigidity and the requirements of the medical customers, like Ryan was saying, you know, if you have an obsolete part, you gotta find a new part. You may have to requalify that whole design. And so again, I go back to the early involvement of the manufacturer to try to work with them to ensure you're not designing this product with parts that are maybe at the end of their life cycle. We have ability to look at those bills of material and determine what parts are potentially going obsolete in the next 6 months, 18 months, year. And I guess, again, the rigidity of the requirements that the medical products bring with them in their, you know, our business is pretty dynamic. We can make changes on the fly, but you can't do that in the medical world. And there's lots of requalifying and rebuilding and recertifying if you're any changes that have to occur due to obsolescence or supplier changes. So that is the biggest, probably one of the biggest challenges.
Thanks, Gary. And then one last question for all of you that we've gotten, and then we better wrap this session up. Have any of the panelists used federal non-diluted fundings, so SBIR, STTR funds, to develop prototypes, or have any of their customers done so? We can start with you, Gary.
We have not, and to my knowledge, none of our customers have. If they have, they haven't told us. So no, I guess that's my answer. Short.
Thanks. Ryan?
No, same situation. Our prototyping, since we don't own the product, is done. The prototyping of that level on financing would be done a different area than we get into. So I agree with Gary.
And Danny?
Yeah, same here. Not to my knowledge that I have been told by any customer.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. And so many additional questions I'd love to ask all of you, but for the sake of time, we better wrap this panel up. And so I'd just like to say thank you again for participating in this panel. And thanks to everyone for participating in today's webinar. You know, we hope you found all the presentations to be informative. You know, for more information on today's summit or the biotech industry in South Dakota, I'd encourage you to visit www.sdbio.org, or of course, contact Joni Johnson at jjohnson@sdbio.org. And finally, I want to let you all know that a recording of this presentation will be shared with you in the coming days. And with that, I will hand it back over to you, Joni.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate everyone's time today, and hopefully you all learned a few things along the way as we've been a chance to get together the last couple of days. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, please give me a shout out. I would love to hear from you. With that, I'll let you all get back to your day. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.